Three Lives, Three Worlds. The Pillow Book. Lower volume. Original work by Tanki Gongzi. English translation, Hamster 428. English editing, Rock Harlequin, Lily, Joanna Kuang. Part 5, Mistaking Destiny. Chapter 20. Dong Hua never showed up on the day of the wedding. 9 days later, he still hadn't shown up. What she had done, what she had said, as Feng Ju thought about them now, she felt her impression of those 9 days was still very hazy. She only remembered it had indeed been a beautiful day on the 4th of March. The sunlight had been particularly warm, and the blue sea had seemed even more beautiful, such that all those who came to the banquet had offered their admiration. Although it was only a supplementary wedding reception, it had been important to both Zonglin and her mother. Except for the vows to heaven and earth, all the other complicated rituals had been prepared. After she dressed, her mother went over the rules of rituals in earnest with her. She felt a little bothered, but she was also very curious and expectant. Immortals from across the realm arrived early to the banquet. Even the pretentious Tianjun came on time. Yet as the auspicious hour came ticking closer, Dong Hua was still nowhere to be seen. She finally panicked. She recalled Daijun had said he would arrive later the night before he left, but he did not say in detail when exactly later would be. Perhaps he wouldn't be back in time for the auspicious hour, she thought. She suddenly felt a little empty. But upon further consideration, it seemed she might be a little petty. Although this wedding was very important, Xiao Yan did say Jaihan's life was in danger. Daijun said he'd only come to take a look at her, but standing before her sick bed, he might feel some pity and decide to stay a bit longer so that he can fulfill her last wishes. No matter what, respect for the dead was the right thing to do. So Daijun wouldn't come back in time. No big deal. She shouldn't fight with someone who was about to die. By the time she had thought things through, Zonglin was hurrying in. The most competent steward of Taichan Palace didn't seem very well. Zonglin averted his gaze and told her, "I still haven't seen Daijun anywhere. He must have been held up by an urgent business. Pardon my asking, if Daijun can't come today, does your highness think we should let go of all the rites and have this be a normal banquet?" Zonglin's suggestion had been in consideration for her honor. It was written on the invitations that this was a wedding reception, but luckily no one really knew how the reception would be like. Making it into a normal banquet wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Banquets were an excuse for immortals to gather and make merry. It wouldn't be a problem if Daijun didn't show up. The elders all knew Daijun had never liked these kind of parties, anyhow. Before retiring to seclusion, it wasn't rare for him to be absent from his own celebratory feasts. But if everything were to go as Zonglin and her mother had arranged, this banquet would be considered a wedding. Daijun's absence would make her, as queen consort, humiliated. She was grateful to Zonglin for his consideration of her. Watching her expression, Zonglin hesitated a while before saying, "This reception was very important to Daijun. If he couldn't make it today, it must be due to an emergency. Daijun would never disregard you. I dare say that since His Majesty had left the banquet to my care, he trusted that no matter what happened, I would be here to protect you." She smiled and replied, "You're right." Once the auspicious hour passed, she felt as though she was freed. Although she had guessed that he wouldn't make it back on time, she had hoped nonetheless. She had arduously waited for more than 2,000 years to have Dai Jun, to become his queen. Of course she was very happy. She didn't really care for these traditions like all the other brides. And yet, she would only be married once in her entire lifetime, and so she couldn't help but hope for it to be perfect. As long as the auspicious hour hadn't come, she couldn't let go of that secret wish. She was a little disappointed, but she had regained her composure since then. Beyond the veranda, cheerful conversations faintly rang out from inside. She perked her ears and listened for a while, feeling it must be very festive inside the grand hall. She wondered why she was feeling a little lonely when it was so festive. She poured herself a cup of dark tea and took little small sips. Halfway through the dinner, her mother and grandmother suddenly appeared outside her room. Elderly Fairy Fumi worriedly sat in front of her. "Juer, tell me the truth. Why didn't Dai Jun come when it's such an important day? Did you and he?" She continued to sip her tea and then gave her grandmother a reassuring smile. "Dai Jun has something urgent to take care of. Before he left, he had told me that if he couldn't make it back in time, Zonglin Xianguan would take care of everything." "Grandma, hadn't Zonglin taken care of everything so well?" Of course Dai Jun had never told her such a thing, but if she were to tell her mother and grandmother the truth, she knew they wouldn't like it. Finally, her grandmother and mother were put at ease. The guests drank to their heart's content at the banquet. Those who were still sober bid their farewells on the same day. The few who were too drunk stayed the night in the guest rooms of the Stone Palace and all gradually took their leave the next day. The holy Blue Sea returned to its desolation. The Bai family stayed for 2 days, then also headed back to King Kaiu. Only she and Zonglin remained at this place. In reality, she was still feeling a little upset. On the first 2 days, she couldn't help wondering from time to time why Dai Jun was delayed for so long. Even if he was fulfilling Jihun's dying wishes, it didn't need to take this long. If he was really pitying her and wanted to stay by her side a bit longer, why didn't he send someone to let her know? At midnight on the 3rd day, she suddenly awakened from a nightmare. In truth, she couldn't at all remember what she had seen. She just suddenly thought to the fact that she hadn't received any news from Dai Jun for several days. Had something happened to him? Her face grew pale as she hastily called for Zonglin in the middle of the night and stuttered her worries to him. Although she knew Dai Jun had gone to see Jihun, she had forgotten to ask that night where Jihun was. She was feeling more nervous by the second, and insisted on urging Zonglin to leave the Blue Sea with her that very night. One was to head to the southwest to look for Xiao Yan, the other to the southeast to look for Jihun's brother, Lord Suyang. 3 days later, the two met again at the Blue Sea. Due to days of traveling, both looked rather weather-worn. When she arrived at the Blue Demon clan's territory with her reason for visit, a rather staid demon envoy frowned to her with a deep sigh and said that their master hadn't returned to the clan in nearly a year. They didn't know where to go to look for him either. If and when she saw him, he asked that she please tell him to come back as soon as possible. The Blue Demon clan would certainly be grateful to her for relaying this message. When Zonglin met with the Red Demon clan, Lord Suyang told him 300 years ago when his younger sister eloped with her guard Minsu, the Red Demon clan had cast her out. Thenceforth, Jihan was no longer related to the Red Demon clan. Where she was now was something they really couldn't offer an answer to. There was no clue at all where Daijun was currently. Zonglin quickly grabbed her as she stumbled and almost fell. In her daze, she saw a few auspicious clouds drifting toward them. Out in front were her paternal grandparents. Following behind them were her parents. Her grandfather's eyes were shot with rage. When he saw her, his anger seemed to have also contained a hint of pity. At last, he asked her, "Where exactly is your husband right now?" She tried to pull herself together and replied, "He's got an urgent matter." Baiji Daijun interrupted her in anger, "So jilting you on your wedding to be illicitly involved with Jihan of the Red Demon clan is an urgent matter." It's true that she herself had been confused these past few days. But she thought that since they were husband and wife, she should trust him unconditionally. She came to his defense instinctively. "What do you mean, Grandpa? I knew about this too. Jihan's life is in danger. Daijun is only seeing her for one last time out of pity. As immortals, we should have compassion for the dying, shouldn't we?" Baiji Daijun sneered. "Seeing her for one last time? Then why did I hear that he had carried Jihan and broken into Danling Palace of the Red Demon clan with lofty aplomb this morning? He was taking Jihan's side to Lord Suyang's face and even traded the Miahua glass of the seventh heaven to force the Red Demon clan to welcome back their banished princess? I heard that when she was lying feebly in his arms, there wasn't any sign of being fatally threatened." A boom went off in her head. Baiji Daijun shook his head as he sighed. Fortunately, the demon clan had clamped down on this news, so not many know of this matter. Otherwise, once this spread across the realm, where will the Bai family put our face? He looked at her. Face is actually not the most important thing. More importantly, how can I tolerate Donghua's mistreatment of you? She had grown completely pale. At long last, she said to him, "I want to hear Daijun's explanation first." Baiji Daijun wanted to continue, but his wife stopped him and softly consoled her, "Come back to King Kaihu with us to rest for the time being. If Donghua is sincere, he will come to King Kaihu to find you." She walked next to her grandmother like a sleepwalker, then turned to Zonglin still like a sleepwalker and said to him in a fragile voice, "It takes one day to go from the Blue Sea to the Red Demon clan, and another from the Red Demon clan to King Kaihu. Tell Daijun I will wait 2 days for him." Now that the entire Bai clan had come to take her away, Zonglin knew he couldn't stop them. He had no other choice but to weakly agree. She spent those 2 days in King Kaihu in a constant daze. Most of the time, she just sat in her room absently. Her father sighed and muttered to her mother that he couldn't stand to see her being so quiet. Although she had always exasperated him whenever she jumped about in her lively ways, at this time he really missed her old appearance. Her mother's response was only to wipe her tears. It wasn't her intention to worry her parents. She was just waiting for an answer. Before she got her answer, everything was wearing her out. In Aranya's dream and at the Blue Sea, she felt Daijun's treatment of her didn't seem to be pretense. But why hadn't he come to look for her? Was he not worried about her? She thought about it but couldn't really figure it out. She thought and thought until her head ached as though a nail was drilling through her skull in painful bouts. Each time the pain passed, a few peculiar fragments emerged from the depths of her mind. For example, she remembered when she fell into Aranya's dream, Daijun had rushed to her rescue. After she gained consciousness, Daijun said many sweet things to comfort her. He told her that it was all his fault that he didn't recognize her when she was the baby fox and let her receive all those grievances. She cried, asking him why he traded her saha fruit. He patiently wiped her tears dry and forthrightly admitted because she said she would use the saha fruit to make pastries for Xiao Yan, he thus became jealous of Xiao Yan. When she mentioned Jihan, he frowned in reply. Why do you think this way? She and I have nothing to do with each other. She believed his words and even forgave him. But the fragments that came and went in her head was in the Shuiyabala forest, on a large bed. She had told Daijun perhaps they weren't fated, that was why parting may be a better thing. He had seemed pensive as he told her, there's no that was why. The truth is that we've already wedded. Because Xiao Bai, don't you like me? Clearly, in her impression, she had always known Zais was Daijun in Aranya's dream. But sometimes when pieces of her memory surfaced, Su Moi would advise her, if you really like him, then don't pressure yourself. Perhaps he's just your type, and coincidentally, Daijun and he are both like that. Who was he? If Zais, hadn't she always known them to be one and the same? She couldn't remember when Daijun had said these things to her, and remembered even less when Su Moi had enlightened her thoughts. When she forced herself to remember, she was only left with a splitting migraine for her efforts. Only when she held her head did she feel some relief. When her mother saw the way she was curling up on the couch and clutching her head in pain, she rushed out in panic to invite High Deity Jian from the 10-mile peach orchard. And yet it was already the morning of the third day. The 2 days she gave Donghua had long passed by. After 2 days of miserably waiting, she at last got her answer. Donghua didn't come. Zonglin didn't come. Her head pounded excruciatingly. The weather was warm outside. High Deity Jian stepped onto the sunlight as he entered into the fox cave. Jian checked her pulse, then reached his hand out to check her soul. When he pulled his hand back, his eyes seemed to be a bit affected. He cleared his throat and asked her mother to bring her some candied ginseng. When only the two of them were left inside, he said, "Someone had altered your memory, did you know?" For a moment, she didn't quite understand. She blankly shook her head. Jian sighed, in this world, those who can change someone's memory using medicine are few and far between. From my rough estimation, there should only be Donghua, Moi Wan, the Buddha, and I. Moi Wan and I, in addition to the Buddha, have no reason to change your memory. As unruly as I am, something so profane, he raised his eyes to look at her. In them were the same faintly discernible pity her grandfather had shown her 3 days ago at the Blue Sea. Jian took from his sleeve a pill. "Take this first. I'll immediately make another one that will recover your memory." She woodenly held the pill against the sunlight shining in from the window panes and softly asked, "This pill doesn't recover my memory? Then why am I taking it?" Jian had stepped 1 foot over the doorway by the time he heard her. He turned back and sighed, "I've heard about you and Donghua from your uncle. I'm not even sure whether this matter is good for you or not at this point." He seemed to struggle for a decision before finally saying, "It's prenatal medicine. You're with child." The room momentarily drowned in stillness. The shiny pill rolled onto the ground. Jian picked it up, slowly came to her, placed it into her hand, and at length stroked her hair. She hadn't shed a single tear in the past 9 days. She finally burst out in tears at this moment. They spilled from her eyes down to her cheeks, but there was neither sound nor expression. Only her voice was a bit shaken as she faintly asked, "Uncle, tell me, how could he have deceived me?" She faintly repeated to herself, "How could he have deceived me?" She didn't like crying, but whenever she cried, it was always so heartbreaking that others couldn't help pitying her. Her expression was calm, only her tears surged like a broken dam, dripping down and soaking her red skirt with water stains that resembled blooming fullings. These 9 days had been too long. Jian sent over the finished pill the next day. When her real memory came back to her, her mood wasn't affected as badly as she had thought it would be. Perhaps it was because she was too tired. She finally remembered. Daijun in reality had never told her why he switched her saha fruit. At the time, Jihan asked and he just gave. He said. He and Jihan had nothing to do with each other, but she clearly saw his special treatment of her. She finally had enough time to think about these things now. He did love her, but that didn't mean he didn't love Jihan. He was supposed to be the most abstemious god from heaven to earth. In the end, was it she or Jihan who had dragged him into this convoluted world? When she fell into Aranya's dream, she was on the brink of death, and he had chosen her. Now that Jihan was on the brink of death, he chose Jihan. Ultimately, who was it that was blind to his own feelings? She reckoned he understood he had wronged her in choosing Jihan. That was why he was too ashamed to come to King Kaiyu to see her. She and Daijun had traveled a very long way. She was chasing after his shadow in the first half of that path so miserably. Luckily, by the grace of heaven, she finally caught up to him in the second half. From the very beginning, it was she who wanted to have him, so no matter how tiring the chase had been, she hadn't seemed to mind. This love was so hard to come by that she had always believed she should cherish it. She had in truth minded the fact that he had missed the wedding, but she thought she could pretend as though she wasn't bothered by it. When her grandfather said Dong Hua and Jihan was having an affair, her mind suddenly went blank. But even as her mind was blank, she still wanted to believe him. She wanted to at least hear it directly from him. She had tried so hard. She thought she had given him enough time. If he would only come here, she would believe him no matter what he said. But the person to fall in love first was always the humble one. Hereafter, she'd have to walk this road alone. She was too tired. She didn't want to have him anymore. 02. It wasn't very easy to live as immortals, for the long road ahead could be extremely lonely. So that their days wouldn't drag by in tedium, immortals needed to find themselves a pastime. For example, Tais Hang Lejun's love for pharmacology, Nanji Xianwang's love for chess playing, and High Deity Bai Qian's love for novel reading were all for this reason. Since they hadn't yet found a hobby, gossiping naturally became the most important endeavor for the younger fairies who had recently ascended to immortality. Whether one was doing the tattling or the listening, the main character in these gossips must be someone both sides knew. That way, it would stay interesting for the both of them. The first deity these fairies had the pleasure to meet after ascending to heaven was of course Lord Shaoyang of the Donghua estate, Donghua Daijun of the 13th heaven. Coincidentally, the biggest scandal in the fairy realm within the past 200 years had to do with Daijun's losing his young bride. As rumors had it, Daijun's wife was quite a character despite her young age. She was the niece of High Deity Bai Qian, Zhukongtian's crown princess, and the granddaughter of Bai Zhi Daijun from King Kaihu. Moreover, she had inherited the throne in King Kaihu since 400 years ago. During the Bingkang ceremony 200 years ago, she had sealed the Hex's sword into Tangting summit by passing a 100 swordsman maze while she was blindfolded with a red sash. Her grace had stolen the hearts of everyone that day. Among the realm's beauties, she was ranked only second to her aunt, Bai Qian. After hearing the rumors, everyone wanted to meet Daijun's bride. They were even more curious as to why Daijun had lost her. However, they could only talk about his personal affair in secret. Not everyone could bear the consequences of sticking one's nose where it didn't belong. No one dared to find out. They only vaguely heard that after the lady went missing, relations between King Kaihu and Taichan Palace seemed to become fairly strained. Daijun, who lost his wife, turned the world upside down searching for her for the past 200 years. In contrast, the Bai family who lost their child curiously did nothing. The friendly high deity Bai Qian was easy to converse with. When Siming Xingjun asked her during tea, she stroked her fan in surprise. Missing? Young ladies from our family always leave home to gain experience, that's all. I've never heard of this rumor before. Who started this rumor? Really, spread something true at least. Siming Xingjun hesitated before respectfully asking again, then can you let me know where Her Highness Fengju went for this training? High deity Bai Qian laughed as she spread open her fan. Children of the Bai family are raised without constraints. She goes where she wants. We don't have a chain on her. I'm afraid I really don't have an answer for you. Siming Xingjun froze for a moment, then said, I'm comforted as long as I know Her Highness is well. The young yet prominent character in these gossips, Her Highness Fengju, was squatting on a hilltop in the mortal realm to slice some yams at this time. Lately, her son Bai Gungun ate too much meat and developed a small case of indigestion. The old apothecary on the foothill prescribed to her a digestive remedy. He said she could either boil some yams with rice gruel or roast some hawberries with brown sugar to treat indigestion for children. Bai Gungun didn't much like sweets, so Fengju decided not to roast hawberries with brown sugar. In a while, she'd go down the mountain to buy some salt to make him salty porridge. Bai Gungun liked salty food. Regarding Fengju's disappearance, High deity Bai Qian didn't really lie to Siming when she said she had gone to train. In ancient times, there was one particularly important subject at the Shuizao's academy that was opened by Fuxian for the various clans to study it, and that was to gain experience in the mortal realm. There are billions of worlds in the Trichiliocosm. Staying 1 year in each world would take at least 1 billion years. Fortunately, Fuxian was kind enough to only randomly select 100,000 mortal worlds for his students to gain experience from. As legend had it, the outstanding students who had the opportunity to experience the world included the future master of the universe, Donghua Daijun, the Heaven Clan's god of war, High deity Moiwan, the Demon Clan's ancestor goddess, Queen Regnant Shaowen, the world's first phoenix, High deity Jian, as well as Fengju's paternal grandparents. It could be seen that all of these students who had gone to the mortal worlds to gain experience had become successful, and greatly successful at that. In the past, when Fengju took over the regent position in the East Land, her father Bai Yi had actually been short-sighted when all he wanted to find was a good son-in-law who could aid her. In this regard, he would never be as far-sighted as her grandfather Bai Ji. Bai Ji Daijun had intended to bring Fengju to the mortal realm after the Binkanji ceremony. She was a queen after all. What dignity could she retain if she were to depend on a prince consort? She should have her own capability. When he told his granddaughter his plans, Fengju surprisingly pleased him by readily agreeing. However, a few things had cropped up since the Bingkang ceremony. Benevolently, Bai Ji Daijun had thought to let his granddaughter rest a couple of years before sending her to the mortal realm. Unexpectedly, she hadn't rested for but a few days before she packed up her things and said her farewells. Seeing how aspiring his young grandchild was, Bai Ji Daijun naturally agreed. Before she left, he gave her an envelope with parchment inside and told her the other half of the set was with her aunt Bai Qian. Since she was all alone outside, if there was anything urgent she needed to see her family for, she could write onto this parchment and her aunt would be able to read her letter. Before going to the mortal realm, Fengju stopped by the underworld to see her friend Xieguku. She stayed there for 3 days and used the Saha fruit to create a body for Ye Qingti, smoothly placing his soul into that immortal shell. Ye Qingti could be resurrected within 3 months, but she could not wait till then for his return. She asked Xieguku to take care of him for her. After he woke up, she asked that he teach him some divine practice to rid of his dark energy. After 300 years, when his cultivation came to an end and before he ascended to heaven, she would come by again to help bring him to the Jade Pond in Zhukongtian to wash away his mortal dusts and join the fairy realm. Those who ascended to heaven firstly needed the help of fate. They then also needed to come to the Jade Pond to wash their impurities away. This ritual must be done by the person who had created the fairy shell. This was the rule written in the Immortality Registry. After arranging everything, she took Bai Gungun, who was still in her womb, to set up camp in the mortal realm. In the first mortal world, Fengju gave birth to Bai Gungun. Afterward, she moved to a different mortal world every 3 years. Although magical spells could easily backfire in the mortal realm and she was therefore restricted in her usage of magic, she was fortunately smart and good with the sword, and so she fared pretty well living among the humans. Within 200 years, she had opened a restaurant in the city, run a bookstore in town, kept a convenience store in the market, and put up a tea shop in the countryside. She was sometimes a shopkeeper, sometimes a helper. She had earned rouge money from the brothel girls at Yuheng House and made money from fortune-telling to the ladies at the local temple. After nearly 10 places, it felt as if she was really cultivating in the mortal realm. She kept cultivating like that until she felt that she had seen all there was to see in the ways of the world. Having seen enough of the ways of the world, Fengju moved to this mortal world the year before when she did not want to continue immersing in the glitz and glamour anymore. Intending to change her taste and try at living in simple recluse, she took her son Bai Gungun to this mountain ravine. This poor ravine that seemed poor was in fact very poor. Nonetheless, it had a very impressive name called Hidden Dragon Ravine. In the Hidden Dragon Ravine was the Hidden Dragon Village. Of course, Hidden Dragon Village was also very poor, but the good news was that it was a large enough village with almost 20 households. Even though they were poor, if they rationed, 20 households could still squeeze out a yam each day to afford a schoolteacher. The schoolteacher was a poor scholar who had repeatedly failed the imperial examination. By the time he grew old, he realized he wasn't meant to become an official in this lifetime. At 60, he went home to teach for a living. His dilapidated private school sat on the outskirt of the village, sitting distantly from and facing the two thatched huts Fengju set up on the hillside. Bai Gun left home each day when the sun rose and did not come back until it set. He slung a small sack his mother sewed for him, crossing half a hill from his thatched hut to his teacher's thatched hut to study. Bai Gun was already 197 years old this year, yet he did not look any different from the human toddlers. He was still as tiny as a pea. If there was any difference, it was just that this pea was a little rounder and cuter than the mortals' little peas. Additionally, he was born with silver hair, and so he seemed a bit more extraordinary than the others. But his extraordinary hair color wasn't exactly a good thing. Thus, Bai Gun had already started to dye his hair since an early age. He once asked his mother the reason why. His mother smiled to him and said it was because they were fairies. He was a little fairy boy, and all little fairy boys had silvery hair and were slow to grow. Bai Gun instantly believed her since he had never met any other fairy or little fairy himself. But as time passed, Bai Gun discovered ever since his mother told him they were fairies, she liked to use it as an excuse for many other things. For example, there were 7 chestnut cakes at home. His mother brought out 2 plates to divide them and gave herself 4 while only giving him 3. When he told her in seriousness that his classmates' mothers never fought with their children over cakes like this, his mother scratched her nose and told him that it was because they were fairies whereas the others were mortals. Fairies and mortals had different rules regarding this. Another example was that his mother liked to kick away the quilt during her sleep. Ever since he was old enough to know things, he would wake up every night to tuck his mother in. He had always thought a son was just born to tuck his mother in at night. Then came one year when he discovered, while chatting with his little friends, that everyone else's family was different from his. He came home and gave his mother a serious talk about how their family should be like that from now on. His mother scratched her nose again and said that in the fairy realm, all the sons woke up in the middle of the night to tuck their mothers in. They were mortals, what did they know about us fairies? Oh, and there was also this other thing. This was very, very important. Bai Gun didn't remember anymore when exactly it was he found out for the first time children in the mortal realm not only had mothers but also fathers. After one of his close friends asked where his father was, he came home to ask his mother. His mother was drying corn in the yard at the time. When she heard him, a bunch of corn cobs fell and hit her foot. She endured the pain and smiled to him reluctantly. I gave birth to you alone. You don't have a father. He ran over with his stout legs to help massage his mother's foot. But all of my classmates have fathers, he asked in puzzlement. His mother's voice sounded slightly far away when she replied to him, that's because we are fairies. Little fairies only have mothers, they don't have fathers. Bai Gun sensed that something fishy was going on, but he didn't have any way to find out the truth. He could only suspect inwardly. He sincerely wished that adults in the fairy realm didn't actually fight with their children over cakes, that adults there would get up to help tuck their children in at night, and that little fairies also had fathers. If that were the case, he would also have a father. There had been times when he wondered what his father would look like if he had one. He used his friends' parents as models. Except for appearances, fathers seemed to excel more than mothers in most aspects. If he had a father, his father would certainly be better at cooking, his swordsmanship would also be better, he would wake up on time, and he would never kick away the quilt. But these were only Bai Gungun's own private thoughts. These were the things he never shared with his mother. Their reclusive lives at the hidden Dragon Ravine were days of idleness and leisure. Birds flocked here at night to the green mountains and white moonlight. Although it wasn't as beautiful as the fairy realm, it had its own quiet beauty. When Fengju thought of how many more years they could remain here, she suddenly felt her heart burning. She brought out the envelope her grandfather had given her. As soon as she opened the letter, she found her Aunt Bai Qian had surely enough written to her. Bai Qian often wrote to her during these 2 centuries. The first letter she wrote was on the 2nd month she arrived in the mortal realm. Her aunt said. 73 days later, Dong Hua finally came to King Kaihu to look for her. She reckoned he thought she was still there. Bai Ji Daijun could not stop him and agreed to let him in. But of course, he couldn't find her. Her aunt said Daijun's expression was very bad, but Bai Ji's wasn't any better. He icily told Dong Hua, "Your Majesty's repute is beyond what the Bai family should have reached for. It was the lass's fault for being wayward to begin with." Fortunately, she finally managed to come to her senses and realized she wasn't fit to share a husband with the princess of the demon clan. She voluntarily seeks a divorce from you. Please grant her an annulment paper. Dong Hua's face was completely without color, but he still managed to calmly say, "These aren't the things Xiao Bai said." At this moment, Hai Diadijian happened to be bringing peach blossom wine to the fox cave. Seeing the tense atmosphere, he politely interfered, all right, let me say a fair word or two." Fengju really didn't say anything about a divorce. But she did ask me a question, "Why do you keep lying to her? Is it because you think she's so stupid and easy to fool? You wanted her as you pleased, then when you didn't want her anymore, you just tossed her to the side. She felt very tired, she didn't want you anymore." Jian threw his hands up. Of course, these words sound like something a child would say in anger, but what do you know, the very next day she really did pack up and leave. Even I haven't seen her to this day. When Daijun heard these things, his face looked very hollow. Fengju was lounging in the courtyard to sunbathe at the time she received this letter. 73 days. She was quiet for a moment, then wrote back asking her aunt if Jihan of the demon clan had been cured from her serious illness and whether the Miahua glass of the 7th heaven in Zhukongtian was in the red demon clan at present. A long time later, her aunt replied with one single word, "Naturally." She stared at that single word intently for a while and thought that Daijun was indeed so meticulous. He had to give appropriate care to Jihan first before coming to look for her. Had she been too shameless in the past that he would think she would stay in place to wait for him? After sitting there lost in thought for a while, she felt she was really perplexing. She had already left, so why was she paying attention to those trivial things? Thereafter, she never replied whenever her aunt mentioned Donghua in her letters. Luckily, her aunt didn't talk about him very much. There was only one time that she said Donghua might have found out she had gone to the mortal realm. High deity Bai Qian expressed admiration for Daijun's methods. She said when Daijun couldn't find her in King Kaihu that day, he instantly returned to Zhukongtian and seized 2 royal mandates from Tianjun, then had the elderly fairies send them in conjunction with the Yupui seal from Taichan Palace to the Demon Clan and the Ghoul Clan. As soon as the 7 demon lords and Ghoul King Lijing received his order, they at once helped to search for her within their respective territory. Bai Qian had no idea what was exactly written in those mandates. Daijun seemed as though he didn't care the entire world would know he had lost his bride the way he was scouring the realm for her. But his expansive search had also been very effective. It only took 180 years to turn the entire world upside down. Failing to find her shadow even after tearing the entire fairy realm apart, Daijun naturally would think of where she was hiding. Bai Qian joked in her letter as she said even if Daijun knew she went into hiding in the mortal realm, the mortal realm was composed of billions of worlds. Sitting in front of the Miuhua glass to scrutinize each world might not even guarantee the discovery of her location. Moreover, the Miuhua glass had been sent to the Red Demon Clan. She heard they hadn't found a suitable place to hang it. It was easy to take the Miuhua glass down, but it was more difficult to hang it up. Even if Donghua personally came there to hang it, such a magnificent waterfall would take several decades to mount. All the same, this was really a problem of his own making. Toward the end, Bai Qian mentioned she recently ran into Donghua by chance. Daijun's spirits seemed to be much worse than before. He was severely thin and his face was looking quite ill. Nevertheless, she immediately added that the weather in heaven wasn't great lately. Even she had caught a cold, so Daijun might have also caught a cold. At the time Fengju received this letter, she was sitting with Bai Gungun on a high mountain peak to listen to the sounds of wind and thunder. The squall flapped against the mountainside like the mortals' ceremonial drums. Bai Gungun listened to it in rapture. Even as his hair was messily blown in the wind, his small face was filled with earnestness, his chest drumming excitedly. Fengju read the entire letter in the squally gusts. She was a bit calmer now compared to a century ago. Although she found it ridiculous that Donghua was looking for her like this, she didn't leave because she was too hurt. That would sound as if she was hiding from him. She didn't do anything wrong, so why would she hide? It wasn't her intention to keep her location a secret. The Bai family just wanted to make things difficult for Donghua out of their indignation. In retrospect, however, there wasn't even anything to be said between Donghua and her anymore. Not seeing each other again wasn't necessarily a bad thing. She took a long deep breath in the wind. And ended up choking herself. What she didn't know was that Bai Qian had hid something from her in this letter. It was true that High Deity Bai Qian met Donghua Daijun, but it wasn't accidental. Rather, Daijun personally invited her to the Jade Pond to view blossoming lotuses. Although Bai Qian was ranked as a high deity, she was still a junior compared to Daijun. As an elder, he could have sent someone to give words if he wanted to invite her out for flower viewing. But Daijun personally wrote an invitation instead. An impressive strength of character was shown through his strong and flowing calligraphy. The scent of tea wafted inside the pavilion by the Jade Pond. The two took their seats. Amidst the tea mist, Dai Jun went straight to the point. Did Xiao Bai come down to the mortal realm? Bai Qian startled, then smiled politely and said, as Feng Ju's friend, Siming had also come to ask me. The Bai family has never cared too much about our children's training progress. All I know is that she's left to go gain some experience. But as for where to, I've really no idea. Dai Jun looked straight at her, his voice was shallow, you do know. Bai Qian's smile faded slightly. Would your majesty like to listen to a story? Without waiting for his response, she continued, that Las Fengju is very good at cooking. She knows how to make anything and everything in this world, but there's one thing she doesn't know how to cook, and that's the unicorn plant. Does your majesty know why? She poured herself a cup of tea and went on, it's not because she hated the taste of the unicorn plant or that she was allergic to it. It's only because this plant only grows in the western heavens and it cannot survive elsewhere. Because it was her childhood favorite, she wasted 300 years in doggedly trying to plant one in Qingqiu. She even neglected her schoolwork in the process and received her father's beatings several times. She had really poured all her energy into it, but the unicorn plant ultimately could not survive in Qingqiu. She was so tired that she simply gave up on it completely. From then on, she never spoke of any dishes with unicorn plant, let alone eating it again. She looked at Dong Hua meaningfully. Once that brat decides to cut things off, she cuts them off more cleanly than anyone. Someone as cold as I am is still exceptionally warm-hearted compared to her in this regard. And the interesting thing is, she always believes herself to be a sentimental person, never realizing how unsympathetic she can be, just like how she never realizes she no longer eats the unicorn plant. Dai Jun suddenly gave a cough, which was followed by a series of coughing fits that lasted for a while before it finally stopped. He said to Bai Qian in a hoarse voice, your analogy is correct. At this time, I'm the unicorn plant she had abandoned. He coughed again. It didn't have her love, so there wasn't anything it could really say after being tossed away. But me, I want to find her and give ourselves another try. Bai Qian's face showed a tiny trace of surprise as she said, then why don't you place your wager in this bet of billions of mortal worlds? Let's see whether you and Fengju are fated or not. Dai Jun's bleak eyes became bleaker upon Bai Qian's remarks. He replied at long last, you're telling me to make a bet on our fate when we are unfated. I may never find her again. Bai Qian's friendly eyes gradually turned cold. She fiddled with the tea lid in her hand and slowly replied, then why search for her if you feel you aren't bound by fate? If you genuinely want to look for her, there will always be a way. Shortly after, Dong Hua really did find another way. It was when Fengju received a letter from Bai Qian while she was pondering on her future at the Hidden Dragon Ravine. This letter surprised Fengju greatly. It was written that the Jade Pond in heaven would be open for the last time on the 5th of May when Dai Jun would be granting titles to newly ascended fairies. After these fairies were allowed to wash away their mortal dusts, the Jade Pond would forever close, and heaven would never permit the immortalization of mortals again. At the end of the letter, Bai Qian wondered since when had Dong Hua investigated Yaking Ti's matter. His action clearly showed that he wanted to use Yaking Ti to force Fengju's hand. He really did find a good way to seek her out. She continued by saying Fuxian had once remarked that Dong Hua had reached the state of single-mindedness in the 9 mental abidings where good and evil were separated by but one thought. What he did was so unkind that perhaps he had lost his balance and was entering straight to the dark side. Fengju held the letter in her hand, unable to stop herself from trembling. It had been many years since she was last this way. End of chapter 20.